When I heard my husband call him son, I felt the floor vanish beneath me. That sentence doesn't capture the trembling in my chest, the way my hands went numb, or how the glass I had been holding slipped, shattering against the hardwood floor with a sound so loud it seemed to echo all the way back into my life's carefully constructed illusions. My daughter Emma was standing there, beaming in her engagement dress, talking animatedly about her wedding plans, unaware that her future husband was also my husband's secret son. And I felt like I had been living inside a lie, one that I didn't even know I was a part of. The day had started so normally. I had woken up to the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen, the soft hum of the dishwasher, and the faint rustling of the city beyond our windows. It was Saturday, a day I usually reserved for baking bread or tidying the garden, but today was different. Emma had called me the night before with sparkling excitement in her voice, asking if we could come over for brunch. She had news she wanted to share in person. By 10 a.m. I was carefully laying out a simple spread. Croissants, jam, a fruit salad of oranges and berries, and my homemade lemon scones, the kind Emma always claimed were better than Grandma's. My husband, Daniel, lingered in the living room, reading the morning paper, occasionally glancing up to smile at the sunlight spilling over the living room floor. Everything smelled and looked perfect. Nothing could have prepared me for the storm waiting behind the polite smiles. When Emma arrived, it was like the air shifted. She bounded through the door, her fiancé Michael behind her, holding a bouquet of lilies. I had met Michael a few times before, always assumed he was just a close family friend's son, charming, polite, and unremarkable enough that he never drew attention. But today there was a kind of warmth in Daniel's smile when he saw Michael. Not the casual warmth of greeting a family friend, but something deeper, more intimate. A pang of curiosity ran through me, but I shrugged it off. Fathers have connections with young men. It wasn't unusual, or so I told myself. We settled into the living room. Conversation flowed. Emma could not stop talking about her wedding plans. Flowers, colors, guest lists, and I found myself laughing at her excitement, feeling the pride only a mother can. But every now and then, Daniel's gaze lingered on Michael longer than seemed natural, his hand brushing Michael's shoulder in a gesture that made my stomach churn without reason. I noticed but tried to ignore it. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe my mind was overreacting to a familial warmth. The first clue came after brunch. Emma and Michael stepped into the kitchen, returning with a bottle of sparkling cider to toast their engagement. I was clearing the table, absent-mindedly stacking plates, when I overheard Daniel whisper, just low enough that I almost didn't catch it, "I'm proud of you, son." I froze. The words hung in the air, incongruent, jagged like splinters in my chest. Son? My husband had never had a son? That's impossible. I turned sharply, my eyes searching his face for recognition, for explanation. Daniel's gaze met mine for a brief moment, then he looked away, a subtle tension in his jaw, as if the words had slipped out against his own careful control. I didn't speak. I could barely breathe. My mind raced, connecting dots I had never imagined existed. I remembered Michael's casual familiarity with Daniel, the ease with which they shared inside jokes, the almost unspoken understanding between them. It had never occurred to me, and yet now everything felt like a puzzle with pieces I had never seen. I excused myself to the garden, telling Emma I needed some air. The spring breeze was crisp, carrying the scent of tulips from the flower bed, and yet the freshness of the air did nothing to clear the storm inside me. My hands shook as I held the railing, staring down at the grass, listening to the distant hum of traffic. I kept replaying Daniel's words over and over. "I'm proud of you, son." Who was Michael, really? When I returned inside, everything seemed the same, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, Emma's radiant smile, but I could no longer participate. I sat silently, my mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. Daniel caught my eye again, and this time I noticed the subtle guilt flicker across his face. My heart twisted. I had to know. I waited until Emma and Michael had gone upstairs to look at wedding albums, leaving Daniel alone in the living room. I approached cautiously, the weight of suspicion pressing down on me like a physical force. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who is he, really?" He turned to me, and for a moment, the mask of casual fatherly warmth fell away. There was something raw in his expression. Hesitation, shame, and fear all rolled into one. I didn't want you to find out this way," he murmured, his voice trembling slightly. That was the moment the truth began to unravel. The moment I realized my life as I knew it had been constructed over secrets and omissions. Our life before that day had been quiet, predictable, and comfortable. Daniel and I had been married for 23 years, our home filled with routines that carried a certain warmth. Emma had just turned 25, blossoming into a confident young woman with a sharp wit and a kind heart. She had been the glue holding our small family together after Daniel's long hours at the firm and my part-time work at the community center. Our evenings were often filled with soft chatter and the smell of dinner cooking. Daniel would hum while making something as simple as roasted vegetables, and Emma would sometimes sit on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs, chatting about her day. I would linger near the stove, stirring, tasting, nodding. Everything felt safe. Daniel had always been a man of charm, occasionally reserved, but attentive in ways that mattered. He was affectionate, sometimes distracted, but a steady presence. And yet, there had always been gaps, silences I had dismissed as fatigue or concentration. Now, in retrospect, those silences had been signals, breadcrumbs I hadn't the courage to follow. Michael had always been around in small ways. Family dinners, casual holidays, community events. I remembered first meeting him at Emma's graduation party, when he had smiled shyly and said, "It's really nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Carter." At the time, I had assumed he was simply a friend of a friend, the sort of polite, well-mannered young man any mother would approve of. Little did I know he was something entirely different. Someone whose existence had been deliberately hidden from me. A living reminder of a past Daniel had buried. Even the way Daniel looked at Michael, laughed at his jokes, or guided him subtly in conversation, had always seemed natural, almost protective. But now, with the knowledge that they shared blood, those same gestures struck a cold chord in me, twisting warmth into suspicion, affection into deception. The brunch had been the first real crack in the facade, but the unease had started subtly before that. I had noticed Daniel growing unusually attentive toward Michael in the past few months. The way he would listen more intently to Michael's stories, nod knowingly at inside jokes I didn't understand, or offer advice that felt personal. I brushed it off, attributing it to fatherly mentorship or genuine interest. But small inconsistencies began to pile up. Michael mentioned details about Daniel's life that no casual acquaintance could know. Names of colleagues, places Daniel had never mentioned visiting, childhood anecdotes that seemed oddly specific. When I asked Michael casually, he would smile awkwardly, laugh it off, or change the subject. And Daniel, always quick with a reassuring smile, would steer the conversation elsewhere, his gaze lingering on Michael in ways that gnawed at the edges of my calm. Then came the whispered conversation. I was passing the hallway, my hand on the doorknob, when I heard Daniel say softly, "I'm proud of you, son. You've grown into a fine man." I stopped mid-step, my heart hammering, unsure if I had really heard it. But there it was again, a confirmation I could not ignore. I wanted to believe it was a slip of the tongue, some familial nickname, but deep down my intuition screamed that it was more. I started observing. I noticed subtle cues. The way Michael's eyes would shift when Daniel walked into the room, a mixture of respect and familiarity. How he anticipated Daniel's moods and preferences with uncanny precision. A part of me began to connect the dots. The long silences, the hidden smiles, the careful omissions, and the weight of realization pressed down. The thought that Michael might be Daniel's son seemed impossible, yet the evidence was mounting. I felt trapped between disbelief and fear, a fragile tension holding me together. Could it be true? How had Daniel managed this secret for decades? And most importantly, how had I been so blind? The day of Emma and Michael's engagement celebration arrived, and I felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything smelled the same, the faint aroma of freshly cut grass, the rich perfume of my gardenias, but nothing felt familiar. I could barely focus on the decorations or the excited chatter of family and friends. My mind was locked on Daniel and Michael, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed too monstrous to be true. I watched from the doorway as Michael laughed at one of Daniel's jokes. There was a comfort there that no mentor-student relationship could explain, a natural ease that only comes from shared blood. My heart sank with each passing second, a quiet, relentless ache. I tried to remind myself that these were speculations, suspicions without proof, but my instincts screamed otherwise. The first real confrontation happened after the initial greetings had died down. I found Daniel in the kitchen, absently arranging glasses on a tray. The house was humming with activity. Emma flitted between guests, laughter spilling into every corner. But Daniel seemed suspended in a bubble of quiet tension. "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice calm, "we need to talk." He looked up, startled, and then carefully placed the tray down. His eyes, normally steady and confident, were clouded with something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. I need to know the truth," I continued, my voice low but firm. "Who is Michael?" Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. He ran a hand over his face, and for a moment I thought he might crumble right there. "I wanted to tell you. I didn't know how," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My mind raced back through years of overlooked moments, the subtle hints, the questions I had shrugged off, the little anomalies in Michael's knowledge and mannerisms. Everything clicked, and yet it was almost unbearable to accept. Daniel finally took a deep breath and said, "Michael is my son, from a relationship long before we met. I kept it hidden to protect him, and I thought I was protecting you too." The words hit me like a physical blow. My knees felt weak, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to stay upright. I could see the shame in Daniel's eyes, the desperation, the guilt, but I could also feel the betrayal deep and raw. I've been raising my own stepson as a friend, a part of our family, without even knowing it? The words escaped in a trembling whisper, more a statement than a question. "Yes," Daniel admitted. "I never wanted you to find out this way. I thought, maybe someday I could explain, but not like this, not with Emma's wedding looming." I staggered back into the living room, trying to ground myself in the normalcy of the celebration outside the kitchen walls. Emma's laughter rang out, a melody I had loved all my life, but it now felt distant, almost painful. I wondered how I could face her with this revelation, how I could navigate the impossible intersection of love, deceit, and family loyalty. As the afternoon moved on, I realized the enormity of the secret. It wasn't just a casual lie or a hidden past. It was a truth that redefined the relationships in our entire family. Michael, my daughter's fiancé, was not just a family friend, not just a kind young man I had come to admire and respect. He was Daniel's son, my husband's son. And in an irony so cruel I could barely comprehend it, my daughter was engaged to him. I felt a surge of nausea, a twisting of my insides as I watched them together. Emma's joy was radiant, pure, untainted by the secrets swirling beneath the surface. Michael's smiles were tender, loving, and innocent. And Daniel sat quietly watching, silently suffering, knowing the truth would soon erupt like a storm. I had to confront him again, but this time I needed answers. "Daniel," I whispered, pulling him aside. How did this happen?" He swallowed hard, and I could see the decades of shame and guilt etched into his face. "It was before you," he began. "A relationship I made a mistake in. I never wanted to hurt anyone, and I never wanted him to know. I tried to do what I thought was best for everyone, keeping him safe, keeping you safe, keeping our family together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and demand how he could hide something so monumental for so long. But the words lodged in my throat. Instead I asked, and now? After all these years, you let him marry my daughter. I didn't know how to tell you, he said, voice breaking. I thought if we ignored it, it would be easier. But now it's out. I can't fix this. I can only hope you'll understand someday. I walked away, feeling like I was in a nightmare. The betrayal wasn't just in the secret. It was in the years of deception, the false normalcy, the unspoken truths that had shaped our lives without my knowledge. I had to act, but the path wasn't clear. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I also couldn't let this go unchecked. I found myself pacing the kitchen, thinking of Emma, thinking of Michael, thinking of Daniel. How could I protect my daughter from heartbreak, yet not destroy the fragile threads of family loyalty? How could I navigate a situation where every choice seemed wrong, where every step forward felt like betrayal? I decided I had to speak to Michael first. I waited until he was alone, reviewing wedding plans in the study. Michael, I said gently, my voice shaking, there's something you need to know. His head lifted, eyes curious. What's wrong? I took a deep breath, steadying my hands. Daniel, he's your father. The words hung in the air. Michael's face went pale, then a wave of confusion, then disbelief. What, how? He stammered. Why didn't anyone tell me? I didn't know either, I admitted, tears stinging my eyes. I found out today, and I needed you to hear it from me first before anyone else. Michael sat back, silent, processing. I could see the gears turning in his mind, trying to reconcile the truth with the life he thought he knew. His hands clenched, then relaxed. I need to think, he said finally. I need to talk to Daniel. I nodded. I knew he deserved answers, truth, and clarity. And I knew that what came next, the confrontation between father and son, would determine the course of all our lives. The living room felt heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes breathing a labor. I watched as Michael left the study and found Daniel in the kitchen. I stayed in the doorway, invisible yet present, straining to hear. What followed was a conversation I will never forget. Daniel, is it true? Michael's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. A mixture of disbelief and hurt. Daniel nodded, shoulders slumping. Yes. I should have told you years ago. I thought I was protecting you, protecting everyone. But I see now I only made things worse. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair. All these years you let me grow up thinking you were just a family friend? How could you keep this from me? I was afraid, Daniel admitted. Afraid of your reaction, afraid of the consequences. I wanted to control the damage, to keep the family safe. His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the weight he had carried in silence for decades. Michael stood, pacing a few steps, then turned sharply. Safe? You think this is safe? My whole life is a lie. And Emma, she doesn't even know. She's marrying her father's son. His voice rose, sharp and filled with raw emotion. I stepped forward quietly. Michael, listen. We can stop this. We can prevent more hurt. Emma deserves the truth, but we need to handle it carefully. He looked at me, eyes wide, a mix of anger, shock, and confusion swirling inside. You knew. I shook my head, tears threatening to spill. I only found out today. Just like you, I am reeling. But right now we need to act. Not out of revenge, but out of love. For Emma. For everyone involved. Daniel's head dropped. I never wanted this. I thought it could stay hidden. I wanted to protect my son, my wife, my daughter. I thought I could manage it all. Michael's face softened just a fraction. And yet here we are. How do we fix this? I swallowed hard, my own heart aching. We tell Emma. Slowly. Calmly. We let her make the decisions, but we cannot keep her in the dark. That evening I found Emma in her room, arranging her wedding album. She looked up, eyes bright, completely unaware of the storm that had already begun to ripple through our family. "Mom, can you believe this bouquet I found? It's perfect for the spring wedding." She laughed, a sound so full of life that it made my chest tighten. I took a deep breath, sitting beside her. "Emma, I need to talk to you about Michael," I said softly. She tilted her head, curiosity shining in her eyes. "What about him?" I hesitated, gathering the strength to speak the words that could change everything. "There's something you need to know. Something Daniel and I only found out today. Michael is Daniel's son." Her laughter died instantly, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. "What? That's impossible. He can't be, you're joking." "I wish I were," I whispered. "I wouldn't tell you if it weren't true. But it is. Your fiancé is your father's son. You are not related by blood, but it changes things. It's a huge secret that has been kept for decades." Emma's face went pale. She sank onto the bed, hands clutching the edge of the mattress. "Oh my God. How could this happen? Why didn't anyone tell me?" I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "We didn't know either. None of us knew. And now we have to decide what to do next together." She stared at me, tears forming. I don't know if I can go through with this. I love him, but it feels like my whole life has been a lie." "I know," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "And you have every right to feel that way. But we will face it together. You're not alone." Over the next few days, our family was consumed by tension. Conversations were cautious, careful. Each word weighed for its potential to hurt or inflame. Michael stayed mostly in his room, alternating between pacing, staring at walls, and long silent phone calls with his own mother, who had been blissfully unaware of the family entanglement. Daniel, too, was quieter than I had ever seen him, haunted, reflective, full of remorse. I spent hours alone in the garden, breathing in the scent of jasmine and honeysuckle, trying to steady my mind. I had never felt so conflicted in my life. I loved my husband, I loved my daughter, but the deception that had come to light made me question everything. How could I trust Daniel again? How could I support Emma when her entire understanding of love and family had been upended? One evening I decided to confront Daniel again, not with anger but with clarity. I found him in his study, hunched over old photographs, a silent man lost in the weight of his choices. "Daniel," I said softly. He looked up, eyes red, exhaustion and guilt etched deep into his features. "I need you to be honest with me," I continued. "Not just about Michael, but about everything. Why did you keep this secret for so long? Why did you let him grow up thinking he had no father?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I was scared. Scared of judgment, scared of losing you, scared of losing him. I thought I could protect everyone by staying silent. I didn't realize the cost, until now." "The cost is enormous," I said, voice trembling. "You've shattered Emma's world. You've shattered mine. And Michael, he's trying to reconcile a life he didn't know existed." Daniel's shoulders slumped further. I know I have to face the consequences. I don't know if forgiveness is possible. I don't know if any of this can be fixed." I took a deep breath, searching for strength. "It can be fixed, Daniel. But not by hiding. Not by ignoring it. The truth is out, and now we have to navigate it with honesty, with compassion, with respect for Emma and Michael's feelings." The public confrontation came sooner than expected. Emma, after a long night of tears and reflection, called the family together. Her voice was steady though laced with emotion. "We can't ignore this anymore," she began. "I need to understand the truth from all of you, and we need to decide what happens next." Michael, pale and tense, nodded, and Daniel finally spoke, voice steady but filled with remorse. "Michael, I am your father. I should have told you years ago, but I didn't. I tried to protect you and this family, But I see now that my choices caused more pain than I could have imagined. Emma's eyes were wide, tears glimmering, but she did not turn away. I need time, she said softly. I love him, but I can't ignore this. I need to understand what it means for us. The room was silent, heavy with the weight of truth. And in that silence I realized that the journey toward healing had begun, not with revenge, not with anger, but with honesty, courage, and the slow rebuilding of trust. The days following Emma's confrontation were tense, yet strangely transformative. Our home, once filled with the easy rhythms of family life, now hummed with an unspoken awareness. Every glance, every gesture seemed loaded with the weight of the truth, yet beneath the tension, there was also a fragile thread of hope. Michael and Daniel spent long hours talking, long, honest, raw conversations that peeled away decades of secrecy. I would catch snippets as I passed by, voices raised not in anger but in the confusion of understanding, laughter broken through tears, the tremor of emotions trying to align themselves with reality. It was uncomfortable, messy, and real, the kind of family reckoning that stories are made of. I found myself often in my garden, hands buried in soil, grounding myself in the simplicity of life when everything else felt unstable. The scent of earth after rain, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of the city. It became a meditative rhythm, a counterpoint to the storm within the house. And yet, even there, I couldn't escape the questions that churned endlessly. How could Daniel carry such a secret for so long? How could Michael and Emma navigate a love suddenly complicated by a truth neither expected? And most importantly, could our family survive the revelation? Emma's perspective, of course, was central. She oscillated between anger, disbelief, and deep sadness. One evening, she came into the garden where I was planting marigolds, tears streaking her face. "Mom, I don't know if I can marry him anymore," she confessed, voice trembling. "I love Michael, but it's too much. All this hidden history. How do I even look at him without thinking of Daniel?" I sat beside her, letting her grief spill into the quiet night. "Emma," I said gently, "love is complicated and life has a way of testing us, but Michael didn't know. He isn't responsible for Daniel's choices. And you have a right to take your time to make a decision that feels right for you. No one is asking you to forgive immediately, or to act without thought. But know this, your feelings matter and your choice matters." Her hand found mine, squeezing tightly. I feel like my life is unraveling." "I know," I whispered. "But sometimes the unraveling is the first step toward weaving something stronger, something more honest." Daniel, meanwhile, had begun to confront the tangible consequences of his long-kept secret. Friends, extended family, and even co-workers had begun to sense the tension, whispers finding their way through the town. For the first time in years, Daniel faced judgment not as a concept, but in reality. Eyes watching, conversations shifting when he entered a room. The man who had been so careful, so meticulous in hiding the past, now felt exposed in the most human way. One afternoon, Daniel came to me quietly, his face pale. "I've started telling my friends," he admitted. "I can't hide anymore. It's exhausting, but I feel lighter somehow, even if it's painful." I nodded. "Truth has that power," I said softly. "It hurts, it shakes you, but it also frees you. You're not the same man who hid these secrets, Daniel. You're someone who has faced the consequences and begun the process of making things right." And slowly, our family began to find a rhythm. Michael, Emma, and Daniel started engaging in honest, sometimes awkward conversations that required patience and understanding. Boundaries were set, emotions expressed, and every step was a negotiation of feelings. Emma still struggled with the betrayal, but she also recognized the human flaws behind it. The fear, the shame, the misguided protection. I spent long evenings with Michael too, often just sitting in the quiet, letting him process his own turmoil. One night he confided in me, his voice breaking through the stillness. "I don't hate him, Mrs. Carter," he said quietly. "I'm angry, confused, but I don't hate him. And I don't want to hurt Emma. I feel lost." I reached over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's fair," I said gently. "You're allowed to feel all of that. And you're allowed to take time to decide what kind of relationship you want with Daniel and with this family. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's slow and sometimes painful, but it's possible." News of Daniel's secret son inevitably spread beyond the walls of our home. Friends and neighbors, once only privy to surface-level family chatter, now whispered of the hidden past, speculating and judging. Some offered sympathy. Others delivered thinly veiled critiques, questioning Daniel's morality, our family's integrity, and the foundations of trust. We faced it with as much dignity as we could muster. Daniel spoke openly to anyone who asked, never defensive, never evasive. Michael and Emma chose silence at first, taking time to navigate their emotions. I too became a stabilizing presence, guiding conversations, clarifying facts, and reminding everyone that while the past could not be changed, the way we responded to it could define us. The impact of truth was tangible. Daniel lost a few acquaintances who could not forgive, but he gained a deeper sense of clarity and self-respect. Michael, though wounded by the deception, began to understand the human frailty behind it, and his relationship with Emma transformed from naive engagement bliss to a more deliberate, mature partnership. They had to rebuild trust not only with each other but within the larger family network. At a small gathering with our closest relatives, we laid everything bare. Daniel addressed the family directly, his voice steady, weighted with remorse. "I cannot change the past. I cannot undo the mistakes I made. But I can live with integrity from this moment forward. Michael is my son, and he deserves to know the truth, to have agency, and to be part of this family openly. I ask for understanding, if not forgiveness, as we navigate this together." There was silence at first. Some eyes glistened with tears, others with skepticism. Then Emma, standing tall beside Michael, spoke. "We have all been blindsided. We have all been hurt. But we are still a family. It will take time, but we choose to face this together, honestly and openly. No more secrets." It was a moment that felt like the first fragile step toward rebuilding. The weight of decades lifted slightly, replaced by the daunting but promising task of reconciliation. The following weeks were quiet, almost painfully slow, but they were necessary. Life didn't return to normal overnight. It never does after a revelation of this magnitude. Every morning I woke up acutely aware of the delicate balance we were trying to maintain. Daniel trying to atone for the past, Michael grappling with a new identity as both my daughter's fiancé and my husband's son, and Emma navigating her love for Michael while processing the betrayal of trust she never saw coming. I spent long mornings baking bread and making tea, grounding myself in small familiar rituals. The smell of yeast and honey filled the kitchen, and for a moment, I could almost pretend that nothing had changed. But even in the quiet, the undercurrent of tension was ever present. Every conversation had to be measured, every gesture scrutinized. I noticed Daniel's hand tremble slightly when he poured coffee, the way he avoided looking directly at Michael for too long. Michael, for his part, was quiet and reserved, his usual humor replaced with a contemplative edge that made me ache for him. Emma, bless her, held a remarkable grace. She would cry in private, letting the tears fall freely, then return to the family space with a calm smile, asking simple questions like, "Mom, can you help me pick out flowers?" It was exhausting and beautiful. The human capacity to carry pain while still making space for love. One evening I found Michael sitting alone on the back porch, staring at the twilight sky. I joined him quietly, offering a blanket and a cup of chamomile tea. He accepted both, sipping slowly, lost in thought. I never imagined life could change like this, he said softly. One day I'm planning my wedding with Emma, thinking I know my family, and the next, everything shifts. I know, I said gently. It's a lot to take in. But sometimes the truth, even when painful, allows us to see life more clearly. You're still Michael, still the person Emma loves. That hasn't changed. He nodded slowly, eyes misty. I wish it didn't have to be this way. I wish I could have grown up knowing, instead of finding out at the worst possible time. I understand, I whispered. But you have a choice now. How you carry this truth forward, how you engage with Daniel, how you choose to live your life. It's all in your hands. That's more power than many ever have. He exhaled deeply, finally allowing some of the tension to leave his shoulders. Thank you, he said simply. I think I needed to hear that. The next turning point came when we decided together that open communication was key. Daniel agreed to meet with Michael's mother, who had been unaware of his existence until now. The conversation was awkward, filled with questions, tears, and long pauses, but it also provided clarity. Michael's mother expressed her hurt, yes, but also a surprising willingness to engage, to rebuild some semblance of connection for the sake of her son. At home, Daniel and I began to rebuild our relationship too. It wasn't easy. I had to reconcile the man I loved with the man who had carried this secret for decades. We spoke late into the night, unraveling decades of choices, fears, and regrets. I allowed myself to feel my anger, my betrayal, my hurt, but I also allowed room for empathy. Daniel had been human, flawed, and yes, he had made mistakes, but he had also demonstrated courage in finally facing them. Emma finally found her voice. One evening, sitting with Michael and me in the living room, she spoke with clarity that surprised us both. I've been so angry, she admitted. At everyone. At Dad. At Michael. And myself for not seeing this. But I realize now that love isn't simple. It doesn't always make sense. I love Michael. I've always loved him. And I think I can forgive, even if it takes time. Michael's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. Emma, he whispered, voice thick, I love you. And I promise I will do everything I can to honor this family, to respect the truth, and to make things right. Her smile, small but genuine, filled the room with warmth. It was a tentative beginning, fragile but real. And in that moment I realized that healing isn't a grand gesture. It's a series of small, courageous steps. Months passed, and life gradually found a new rhythm. The wedding was postponed, not canceled, giving Emma and Michael time to process, understand, and rebuild trust. When it finally happened, it was not the carefree celebration I had once imagined. It was intimate, thoughtful, and deeply honest. An event marked not by perfection but by authenticity. Daniel and Michael had forged a tentative but growing bond. There were still moments of tension, lingering hurt, and awkwardness, but there was also laughter, shared memories being created anew, and a recognition that family isn't about flawless beginnings, but about the effort to heal, connect, and grow. Emma flourished in her new role as a bride, more mature, more grounded, and remarkably resilient. She handled the delicate balance of love, trust, and family truth with a grace I admired. And Michael, he carried the weight of revelation with dignity, making conscious choices to be present, honest, and loving. For myself, the journey was one of introspection. I learned that even when life unravels in ways you cannot predict, there is power in facing the truth. I learned to hold space for anger and sadness, for confusion and doubt, without letting them define me. I learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength, and sometimes the bravest act is to allow someone to try again, fully and transparently. I also realized that secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, have a cost. Daniel had tried to protect everyone with silence, but the cost of that silence had been enormous. I chose to let go of resentment, not because the betrayal didn't hurt, but because I refused to let it consume the future we could still build. In the evenings when the house grew quiet and the last light faded from the sky, I would sit in my garden, sipping tea, reflecting on the weeks of turbulence. The jasmine and honeysuckle smelled sweeter than ever, not because life had returned to normal, but because we had learned to breathe, even in the aftermath of chaos. Sitting here now looking out at the garden as the sun dips behind the horizon, I can't help but think about how fragile life really is, and how powerful truth can be. Our family's story could have ended in heartbreak, in bitterness, in relationships severed beyond repair. But it didn't. Not because the secret disappeared, not because the betrayal wasn't real, but because we chose honesty, courage, and compassion over silence and resentment. I think about Emma, growing into her own strength, learning that love isn't simple, that life doesn't always give you clear answers, but that sometimes, facing reality with courage can open doors you never imagined. I think about Michael, who had to confront a father he barely knew and reconcile his feelings for a future wife caught in the middle of it all. And Daniel, a man weighed down by decades of secrecy, finally learning that redemption begins with acknowledgement and accountability. For me, this story is a reminder that life is messy, that families are complicated, and that people, flawed, human, and imperfect, can still find ways to heal. Secrets may stay hidden for a while, but truth has a way of emerging. And when it does, we have a choice: to let it destroy us, or to use it as a bridge to understanding, forgiveness, and growth. So I ask you, dear viewer, if you discovered a hidden truth that could change everything you thought you knew about your family, what would you do? Would you run, confront, or try to heal? Life rarely gives perfect answers, but it always gives us a choice. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own family struggles, or gave you hope for healing after betrayal, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, real, emotional, and human, consider subscribing and supporting the channel. We have so many lives, so many secrets, and so many lessons to explore together.